This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, okay. And yeah, so let's start with introductions. I think Emma said that maybe she would should just sort of do a roll call of who she sees here in the meeting, and then I should cover it.
Great. So we have Allison Camp, Holly Rockwell, Sandy Coffin, Brian Sorensen, Carla Berg, Teresa Rourke, Dennis Wyrick. I don't know that I see Rosie yet. So our Vice Chair, Rosie Rosenberg, hopefully will join us soon, but I don't see him yet. Kevin Campbell. I'm not seeing Sam Miller. Oh, there's Sam. Okay, Sam Miller's joined us. He's the Active Transportation Liaison from Eugene. And Steve Abbott has also joined us, and he will be taking over that role after this meeting. So welcome, Steve. And our council liaison, Councilor Sherry Moore, I do not see, nor our Planning Commission liaison, Andrew Landon. Hopefully they both join us. Simon Dawes, the Lamb-Lane liaison, is here in the meeting with us. And I don't see Lawton Elliott DeAngelis, the Springfield Safe Routes to School liaison yet, but I also hope that he joins us soon. Then as far as staff, we have myself, Emma Newman, the Senior Transportation Planner. Michael Liebler is in the council chambers there, supporting with technological support on site. And Don Williams is taking minutes for us. And then we have a number of staff who have joined us this evening for specific agenda items. So we have Jeff Pascal, our city engineer, Christy Kruger, our principal engineer who manages the capital project delivery, and Brock Javish is also here to talk about a project. So I will let them do slightly more detailed introductions when we get to those agenda items. Is there anyone else on the line who I missed? Oh, I think Grace Kaplowitz. Yeah. So Grace Kaplowitz, my former intern, she just wrapped up her internship, but she is joining us this evening to listen in.
Great. Thank you very much, Emma. Did everyone have a chance to review the agenda? And are there any questions about what we'll be talking about today? We're good. All right. Then we'll move forward. Is there anyone willing to, did everyone get a chance to review the meeting minutes from February? And would anyone like to present a motion?
This is Dennis. I will make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
Great, thank you. Second. Carla seconded that motion. So the minutes from February meeting are approved.
It looks like we have a caller 4 that just joined us. If you just joined, would you mind announcing who you are, please?
Yeah, this is Lawton. I wasn't able to get the GoToMeet up and running for some reason, so just phoning in.
Thanks, Lawton. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Great.
Glad to be here.
All right. Oh, I think I skipped public comment, but are we safe to say, do we have any public? No, I don't know.
Steve or Grace, anyone in the council chambers there want to say anything? Okay, I think you're good to go.
Okay, I think we're good on public comment. All right. All right, then we've approved the February meeting minutes. Emma, would you like to talk about some bylaws and ground rules of BPAC?
Yes, thank you. So both posted to the website and emailed out to the committee is the ground rules and protocols document. This document was created by the committee previously just to get on the same page and share what would be most helpful for committee members to be able to show up and fully participate and have a successful experience serving on BPAC. It hasn't been updated for a couple of years since we haven't had new members for a little while, but since time has lapsed, I think it would be a good time to revisit it. I'm not sure that we have a ton of time to get into the details of it today, but I did want to share the document with all of you so that you could look at it. I know a committee member had mentioned recently that they had been contacted by another committee member about email that was not relevant to BPAC. So I just want to let committee members know, please use your BPAC email correspondence for things that relate to the committee work. And as we covered in the orientation, please include myself and CC me. And if you want to include Michael as well, he's an optional person on the email, but all of your emails are public records. So just for email etiquette, please be respectful of your fellow committee members. That might be something that we'd want to incorporate into a revised version of that document. Holly, I'll let you decide how to take this if we want to solicit changes that people might want to see here that we could incorporate and bring back to the committee at the next meeting, or we could also just submit stuff to me or me and you to incorporate going forward.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think seems like it'd be good to have everybody take some time to go over those and maybe bring thoughts to the next meeting. Do other people feel okay with that idea? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that would be good if there is any additions that people want to make, bring them to the next meeting and we can just so that the full committee can discuss those ideas. Or would an email version of that be preferable before the next meeting? Any input?
I'll suggest that people can do either. So either email me and feel free to include Holly, or I'll send it along to Holly between now and the next meeting. And then we'll put this as an agenda item to actually make revisions and approve it as a committee, because you need to take that action at a committee meeting since it's a group decision.
Okay. Sounds perfect.
We need to
All
make
right.
a motion, or this is more of an announcement in preparation for our meeting next time. One thing that I wanted to cover about GoToMeeting in general, since this is a new meeting format for us, if you have something to say, it's helpful if you can just raise your hand, and we'll be trying to keep an eye on the videos to see if someone has something to chime in with. And then Holly or I will know to call on you. If you are not on video but would be willing to share your video, it's really helpful to be able to see, head nods and some body language to make this remote kind of virtual meeting context work a little bit more smoothly. So if any of you who are not showing video would be so kind to share, feel free to do so, but it's not a requirement.
All right. Well, let's move on to the capital projects and the update from Jeff Pascal and Christy Crew.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give a real quick high-level update overview of the CIP, and then I'll let Christy talk about the projects because she's more familiar with the status and where everything's at. And this is kind of really timely as this fall will be coming into a cycle where we're updating the CIP. So the city's capital improvements program is updated every 2 years. It's a public council process, meaning we seek council, meaning we seek public input for projects into the CIP, and we balance that with our master plans, and then we also take a recommendation to the city council, and then the city council adopts that. That 5-year CIP then feeds the capital budget, which is updated every year, and so the first year of the CIP would then be turned into the capital budget. And then the second year, obviously that next year, as we are on a 2-year cycle. And so, like I said, we're updating the CIP this year, and we'll start sometime this fall. We'll see what that looks like, but start sending out and gathering public input. And usually the way I manage that is I get public input a lot over the course of the year sometimes, and so usually I file that away, even if it's an off year, and usually dig those out and start the process of updating the projects then. But the real driver behind our capital projects is our master plans, and I think Emma's talked about that too. And one of the things where we've struggled a little bit on the bike and ped and things like that is needing to update our plan for those types of projects and what our network looks like. But we do have several bike ped projects thanks to some state and federal funding that we do have, because the majority of our free fund, our unspent funds or unallocated funds or unprogrammed funds go towards ADA compliant issues, because that is also a big push within our infrastructure, the need to update all of our facilities to current ADA standards. So a lot of our funds are spent on gaps that we find in other projects where we need to update ramps and the like, and also traffic signals. And with that, I'll let Christy go into the detail on the projects, unless there's any questions on the capital improvement process.
Okay, so I'm Christy Kruger, and I'm a managing civil engineer at the City of Springfield, and I am responsible for the delivery of capital projects. So a lot of the planning stages, the design, and the construction part of capital projects. So I was just going to go over right now what we have in design, what is completed and going to construction this summer, and then what we will start design on once we finish the designs that we're working on right now. And if you have any questions, raise your hand and maybe Emma can watch just to make sure. I'll look down at the projects here just for the list. So right now we have some various projects that we are able to improve bike elements and pedestrian elements as part of some of our other projects, such as the bond overlay projects. So right now we have Mohawk Boulevard and also Olympic Street. The designs are finished and we are about to go out to bid for those projects. They are overlay projects, and with that we are improving all the ADA ramps that are not in compliance, as well as all of the signal amenities for bike and ped. So you should see some good improvements on Mohawk as well as Olympic Street. So this month that project will be going out to bid, and then we'll go to construction. So if anybody has a question on a specific location, just let me know. Another project that the design is finished and we will also be going out to bid is the 42nd overlay project. So we are doing improvements on the bike and ped on that street as well. Virginia Daisy is actually in construction. So yay, we are finally doing Virginia Daisy, yay. So that's the section from 42nd to 51st. So very excited to see that being implemented. And then we have 3 different school crossing locations that are also about to go out to bid. That's going to be advertised very shortly, and that is at G Street and Dos Rios School. Another location is 21st and H, and then another location is 5th and M. So there'll be some good crossing treatments at those locations. And then also 4th Street bike route that is in the works as well. So any questions on the ones that we are about to go into construction or are in construction? Okay.
I am curious about about 42nd and
okay.
Sort of what's happening there, and does it correlate with that bike path that?
So the 42nd one, that project is a bond overlay project, and that is from Main Street until you get to IP. So that's the southern section, unfortunately. We're not quite at the part from IP up to Marcola. So the ones that are,
And I think Kevin has a question.
oh, sorry, I can't see all the little pictures here.
I have a quick question about the improvements to the Mohawk area. The improvements to the ADA ramps, will that extend into the neighborhoods or just along Mohawk itself?
That is only Mohawk Boulevard itself, but on each corner of the intersections.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on those ones? Okay. So projects that are currently in design are our Centennial Overlay project. And then we have High Banks Road and Thurston Road. Those are both overlay. All three of those are actually bond projects, overlay projects. So on all of those, all the ADA elements will be improved, as well as bike facilities. So on Centennial, we are actually turning the regular bike lanes into buffered bike lanes. So we're trying to make improvements with the existing systems as much as possible if we have room on our older streets. Let's see here. Oh, one of the big ones that has been a little bit of a strange missing bike link would be on Thurston Road, and that's right in front of Thurston Middle School. And basically there is a heritage tree that sticks out. It's just this big bump out in Thurston Road going westbound, if folks are familiar with that. And so in order to improve that, we've decided to ramp up, and it would be separated from the sidewalk and then go around the tree and be able to ramp back down. We felt that the shift, if we kept a bike lane and shifted it, that would be not as good as having a protected facility going around the other side of the tree. So that is an improvement that we're going to make on that.
We have a question about what bond overlay means. Can you clarify what those projects are, please?
Sure. So the citizens of Springfield passed a bond measure, and there was a list of projects to improve our city streets. And so there was a list that was developed, and that is basically an overlay project for each one of those roadways. With that, we do have to make ADA improvements. So every location that does not meet ADA on those bond overlay projects, we are improving. Okay, any more questions on that? Okay, so future projects, after those projects are designed, and these are all bike ped related, we have a lot of other projects that are either going to construction or are in design that don't pertain, to bike and ped, such as sewer work. So these are just the bike ped, the projects that have bike ped in it right now. So the future projects that will happen after these ones are in design is the West D Street project, which we are very excited about, and I'm sure a lot of you folks are excited about. So you'll be hearing more about that after I speak about these capital projects. We have Mill Street that we will be completely reconstructing. So a full reconstruct from Main Street to Centennial, I believe it goes all the way up there. So we will be doing
Holly has a question.
Bike and ped improvements as well as the full reconstruct for that one.
So does that mean sidewalks the whole way on Mill Street?
We are making sure that we have sidewalks that whole distance.
Are there plans that are accessible for us to review for what's going forward on that project?
We have not started design yet. So this list that I'm just starting right now, those designs will start. We haven't even looked at it yet to figure out what anything would look like. It's just on the list, and then we'll start getting to it after we finish these designs, these past designs. Let's see here. Okay, we have the Glenwood Riverfront path. The environmental analysis and design will be done on that. We do not have construction money though, so we're doing what we can for that. It's very important that we work with the folks that are on the riverfront first before we start all of that process to make sure that folks are understanding what phase we are in and that they will not be displaced. So that's a very, very important element that we need to work on first before we actually start the NEPA and the design. So that will happen first at the end of the summer. The South 42nd and Daisy Roundabout will be starting design. And Franklin Boulevard Phase 2 design, but we do not have construction money for the Franklin project, but we will do the design for that one. And then we have an RRFB school crossing project at Jasper and Dondia that is going to council next Monday for IGA approval with ODOT. So that project will also be going to design as well. I may have missed some projects, so forgive me, and Emma or Jeff or Liebler can, or Brock can let me know if I missed anything that's happening.
Christy, Teresa has a kind of broader question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, I'm new to this committee, and I was hoping you could clarify for me what the design process looks like, or where, when you say go to design, where and when there are opportunities for public comment on these different projects.
So depending on the project, so some projects have already gone through planning stages, so we know what the project will look like. For instance, Franklin Boulevard Phase 2, the horizontal design is already done. So then we take it from horizontal and finish it through the rest of the design. Some other projects like the Jasper and Dondia project that went through the planning process, went out to get a grant. So we know that there's going, what would be, that it would be an RRFB, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. If there are certain locations though that you have comments on, feel free to get them to Emma or other folks, because I'm always open to any thoughts on projects before we go to construction. Actually, we have made changes in the middle of design before. So
Okay, so just to clarify, it is, I guess there is an opportunity if you're a citizen looking at the list of projects to design and have thoughts, you can just email them to Emma.
definitely, yeah.
And when you say planning process, sorry.
Go for it.
Oh, when you say planning process, some of these have already gone through the planning process. The planning process is typically when there's input from the public, like you would solicit input from the public.
So sometimes there might not be any design options. For instance, let's just say that there's a street and there's an overlay and there is nothing more that we can do than just restripe it the way that it was, or improve the ramps. We may not go out for public opinion just because we do need to keep moving things forward and get things out to construction. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely open at any point for the public to communicate. The capital list is out there on the web, and so at any point people can give input. like I said, though, sometimes we won't officially go out and ask the public opinion if projects, there's really nothing else.
Yeah, Emma, I can speak a little bit more, I think, in depth and use some examples. I think, so taking Virginia Daisy, that went through a long planning process because it was kind of not within our standard typical of a street improvement going to a bicycle pedestrian boulevard. And so we went through a long extended planning process, getting public input on what the various types of treatments the public would be interested in or acceptable. And then when we get to the final design phase, then we're really getting into the ground truthing of getting the detailed topographic, what right of way do we have, what funding do we have, and so what's really feasible. And we try to fit within the best framework of the tools we have in the resources we have with what that public opinion was. And then if we have really drastic changes, we may go back out to the public to say, well, we heard this, but that really, in this situation now that we're really getting into the detailed design and the nuts and bolts and with what will fit within the resources and everything else, here are some other options that will hopefully achieve or could achieve the same outcome. Typically, where we take public input for projects, so let's utilize the upcoming Mill Street design. Our process would really be to try and redesign the roadway to what our new TSP adopted. So any of the new code language that we've come up with through the TSP process and implementation, when Emma took that and put that into code, we would try and reconstruct the street to what the new code language is, as close as possible. Sometimes that's not always feasible because we don't necessarily have the right of way, which can get expensive. And so sometimes we have to get creative. And I would say the times we probably go out and either go to council with design questions or to the public is, yeah, when we have to get creative and we're outside of what has gone through a public process and been approved by the public into our code language. West D Street's going to be an example where that went kind of through a planning process because that's kind of out of the toolbox that we've developed within our code, our development code. And so those would be the times we do and go out. Franklin Boulevard went through a long planning process, but usually those planning processes come long time before we ever actually get to the implementation of a capital project. So I think the reality is if we get to updating our bicycle and ped plan, our citywide plan, that's really the key input, because that would be the master plan for that input. So it's like, okay, we want to see a cycle track here on these when we're updating that. This road is, this link is perfect for this. So this is what that project should be. Or when we did the TSP, what project, that's that public input, because then we're going out to seek dollars to implement that and try and implement it as close as possible to what that planning effort put out there. Does that help?
Thank you.
And I'll just add that, West D Street is an example of a project that we're bringing to you this evening, since there's funding established and we can actually have resources to do something. The Centennial project that Christy talked about, which was funded by the bond measure for an overlay, which an overlay is just the top surface of the street, whereas a full reconstruct is actually digging out and gutting the street and rebuilding the whole thing. So the Centennial overlay project, it was an opportunity to incorporate buffered bike lanes because a former BPAC member, one of our community members, reached out and said, hey, Emma, I saw that this is funded. It's going to be coming up as a project. Is there any opportunity to improve the bike facility above and beyond what the existing condition is, since it's being resurfaced? So whenever you see that things are getting funded, I try to keep you apprised with this annual capital update. There is an attachment that's posted on your webpage, and I emailed out, that has the whole list of projects, so you can be aware of, okay, what's recently completed, what's currently going out, and the ship's mostly sailed. It's too late to give too much substantial input for things that are going out to contracting and construction right now. But then also what's upcoming, what are we applying for with grants, and I'll have some updates at the end of the meeting tonight for those. So whenever we're getting money on the table, whenever we're doing planning processes, or just really whenever, feel free to reach out with questions or suggestions. I'm seeing the time. It looks like we're running a few minutes behind. If there's any last capital questions, let's ask those now. Otherwise, maybe we can start transitioning to the West D Street agenda item. Allie has a question.
Yeah, and I mean, you might not have the answer to this, but will the capital improvements program be affected by the impacts of coronavirus funding for years to come?
You want me to take that, Christy?
Jeff, you're muted.
Right now, I would say no. We just got an update on the budget last night, and just looking at like the fund that would probably have the biggest impact would be the street fund, and that's mostly from gas taxes and the fact that with the stay-home shelter in place, there weren't as many people driving. And so they were projecting, I think over the last quarter, about a $300,000 deficit or less in revenue. But I imagine as the economy opens up and also with gas prices, and we get that we'll start picking up on revenue. So it should be a small blip. And then our other funds, which is not what we're talking about here, are user fees. And so those are pretty much set. So I don't see any issues. Where we may be is if the budget, if there are large budget impacts, it comes down to resources. And so if we end up having to hold positions open, which we have quite a few open right now, and if we were directed to hold positions open or anything, that just affects our ability to be productive and get as many projects out. I mean, you see we have quite a large list that Christy's working with her staff to get out the door, and if we can't fully keep our staff fully geared up, then that's where the impact will be. But I don't see an impact on capital projects going forward.
Thank you.
I think it could affect the federal funding that flows through the Central Lane MPO. So far, the most recent funding round that I've been emailing you some updates about, there was about $19.5 million that was projected. Then with COVID and various economic changes going into place, that was scaled back to about $18.5 million that we're looking to figure out how to fund different projects with at the moment. Going forward, I could see things declining or being better in the transportation funding landscape. Just this last week, Congressman DeFazio from Oregon introduced into the federal Congress a new funding package for transportation, investing in a new vision for the environment and whatever this says that I can't see, surface transportation in America, the INVEST Act. So if that were to pass, then that would add additional dollars and could fund more bike ped and other transportation and construction projects that could benefit, your committee interest needs, but also the broader economy. But if that doesn't pass, then those dollars don't flow. So there's a lot of things that could go multiple different ways, and we're still seeing how it will play out.
Thank you very much, Emma. And thank you, Christy, for sharing that list with us. Are you ready to move on to the West D project?
Yes. So we are excited that we have funding for the West D Street project. And so we have come up with some various concepts of what we would like to potentially do on West D Street to help improve the bike and ped system there. So I am going to turn it over to Brock to discuss our concepts.
Christy, I think first maybe Emma could just speak just a few sentences about some of where the money came from and a little more planning background first.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So this discussion is here before you tonight because of comments and input from previous BPACs. I remember before I was even city staff attending some BPAC meetings back in 2013, 2014. And that's where some of the discussions were really starting, acknowledging that the North Bank Path is a critical facility in our regional walking and biking network. It has the highest use of any other bike ped facility in the city of Springfield. But then, as you all know, it gets to West E Street and the facility changes a lot. All of a sudden, there's a street and the path stops, and then the path starts in Island Park, but how do you get from here to there? So there's definitely some improvements to be made, and concerns have been voiced over the years about speeding along there and how are you supposed to navigate it, whether you're on foot or bicycle or some other active transportation mode, or if you're driving, it's just a slightly confusing space. So I just wanted to say thank you all for continuing this work and your interest in this project, and for taking the time to fill out the questionnaire that Brock provided and I sent out to all of you. I'll now turn it over. Well, I'll share a little bit more about the funding. So in 2015 or so is when I started with the City of Springfield, and there was a funding cycle to try to figure out how to send federal and state funds that come to our metropolitan area, similar to the funding cycle that's happening right now, except it was 5 years ago. And at that point, the City of Springfield applied for funding to do a walking and biking safety improvement project. And that project is a package of different projects. Over the last few years, we've been spending some of the initial funding on school crossing projects that were really high priority locations. We had brought a list of the different project locations throughout the city to BPAC previously, and BPAC weighed in on which ones to prioritize and get built first. And school crossings were really important. So now several of those crossings have been recently completed, and now there's some remaining funding within that grant, which is a federal grant that then was exchanged for state dollars, so the City of Springfield can directly manage and deliver this project. So more recently, Brock was assigned as the project manager, and he is taking this on, and he's the one who helped put together the questionnaire that you all filled out, and I'll now turn it over to him to take the lead on where we are today and what we're looking to accomplish with this agenda item tonight.
Thank you, Emma. So yeah, I am Brock. I'm an engineering technician with Public Works on a small design team with the capital projects side of Public Works. To give you a brief introductory anecdote, it was a year ago that I moved to Springfield and indeed Oregon. And it was actually that first weekend when I landed in Springfield, when I took my bike out to go tool around some of the bike paths and check everything out, and I actually did. I remember making a mental note, biking along West E Street in that transition, and how I thought it was less than ideal. Yeah, that story ends with me breaking my bike chain about a quarter mile later, but that's not the point. The point is, I'm pretty excited to be working with city staff and BPAC and other members of the community, other agencies to make some improvements that we can all agree on. So. Yeah, like Emma said, I want to thank BPAC for their detailed responses on the questionnaire. We had 8 replies, unless I'm wrong, which I understand to be a pretty good turnout. So I think that's a good sign that everyone's fired up to talk about this project and provide some input. So that's all a good thing, and it's for good reason. Some of you may or may not be surprised, like I was, to see on the 1974 Springfield bicycle plan, this was actually, West E was identified as a high use, high hazard route. So really this project is 45 years in the making. So also cool. Emma, if you could scroll and bring up the question number 3 bar graph. Yeah, that one. So these are kind of your responses by your committee members who responded. And this kind of shows the hazards that people are most concerned with. You can see there conflicts between motorized, non-motorized, then pedestrians, cyclists, which all kind of, I think mostly that kind of ties into the poor vision clearance there at that transition, which is, I think, probably primary, and then maybe sort of secondary would be things like lighting, speeding traffic, and then a lack of good pedestrian crosswalks. And so let's talk about some of the proposed design features for improving this corridor along West E. Emma, if you could bring up that visual aid. Basically, Emma, do you have that that visually? There it is.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks.
No problem. So yeah, let's starting at the east end towards Mill Street, where sort of this project limit begins. We have, well, we're going to be proposing that additional or changes in the striping, such as the sharrows, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. That's the icon on the bottom right of this page, and that would be to draw attention to, well, both motorists and non-motorists, that yes, indeed, bicycles are going to be sharing the lane, basically. And then moving west, where Kelly intersects with West D, I have included, or there's kind of a picture of what we're proposing, or what can be proposed as like it's called a tabletop intersection, and basically this is, it kind of has, it serves a couple purposes. Number one, to slow traffic, motorized traffic. So you ramp up, and then both axles of the car, or whatever it may be, are actually on top of this raised intersection, so to speak. And so it's kind of like a speed cushion, but it also has more connectivity for people crossing from Kelly and then onto that part of the green space down there on the south side of West D. And then moving further on west, proposed a raised crosswalk between, just on the east side, just one raised crosswalk on the east side of the Riverview Boulevard and West D intersection. And again, this addresses twofold: to slow motorists, and then to provide a more defined or safer crosswalk for pedestrians that are coming off of Riverview and crossing to the other side of D Street. And then also along this corridor, proposing lighting improvements. So there's a number of poles that exist along West D that either have out-of-date lighting or have no lighting whatsoever. And so all along this part of West D, that's what we're proposing, improved lighting. And then adjustments to the striping, which as it currently exists, possibly going to something like a double yellow all the way through instead of the skip yellow stripe, which exists currently, unless I'm wrong. But then moving west, we get to kind of the main concern with pedestrian and bicycle traffic, which is, as you all well know, pedestrians and bicycles all sort of converging on this very tight transition, which is a conflict. People having near misses, people having actual hits, and then, yeah, bicyclists who may be, because of the south side of West D, because the sidewalk there is actually wider than it would be normally, it kind of encourages bicyclists to mix in with pedestrians, which is a problem, as you all probably know. So at that transition, what we're proposing is to fill in the curb cuts, so go to full height curb, and so that would keep pedestrians on the sidewalk, and they would transition to the multi-use path there and pedestrians only. And then if you can see towards the west side, it's called out a new paved transition where bicyclists or other wheeled modes of transportation would be making that transition to the multi-use path, and that way avoiding that really tight sort of awkward transition that with poor vision clearance, and that would address some of the problems that are going on with that transition there. So that's kind of a basic overview. And then just to mention again, between the proposed new paved transition and what currently exists, another speed cushion. Now this is unlike a raised crosswalk where there's actually like pedestrian and ramps. This would just be a speed cushion, kind of like what currently exists on the more westerly side of this corridor, again, to address speeding traffic and to bring bring motorists to a lower speed. And then, so that's kind of the basic design concepts that we're proposing to address some of the concerns that were brought up in the questionnaire, and well, their impacts to both pedestrian and, well, motorized and non-motorized safety are pretty well documented. But
another element at that transition that we are proposing is that if you're on the path headed eastbound, then you head north, right before it meets that sidewalk, we would be reconstructing it so that the path is further to the west so that you can see folks coming around much easier.
yeah, there's
Getting a
definitely
thumbs up from Holly on that one.
yeah, there's
Yeah,
some room to
very
work
much
with there.
support that idea. That's it.
And then improved lighting as well throughout the corridor, removing old lighting and replacing it with LED lighting, and then any place that there's a pole, then putting a new light on the pole.
See, Teresa has a hand up.
You're muted.
Teresa, you're still muted. You're doing great about keeping muted. There you go. Thanks.
My apologies if I missed it, but does this proposal also include widening the ramp right where the path kind of transitions to the street?
So that would no longer be a ramp. That would be completely curbed off so that the bike transition to the roadway and off the roadway is that further to the west location on the image. So that would be the cyclists in and off West D Street instead of this location where it currently is.
I'm seeing Brian has a hand up. Please unmute yourself. There you go.
There's something over where the new transition would be, where she's talking about.
I'll point out for a second here, just a second. Sorry, multiple.
And I guess would it also have a wider ramp?
Yes, the ramp would be a wide ramp.
Can you see my cursor?
Okay.
So this would be the preferred bike ramp, and then the existing ramp up here would be curbed height, so that would be essentially closed. If you wanted to bike along like at a slow pace and you were biking with kids or something, you could continue along the path, have a little bit better visibility up here, and then go at a slow speed along the sidewalk to connect down to Island Park. But the intention is to provide this bike connection for the vast majority of people biking to get more easily on and off West D Street and not have the higher speed cyclists mixed with poor visibility and pedestrian traffic.
So if you were headed westbound in the lane as a cyclist, then there's a center turn lane right there. So you would get into that center turn lane and then be able to essentially take that left and go and ramp to a path that we would put in there to then get onto the regular path. And then if you're going eastbound on the path and want to continue eastbound on West D Street, then you would take that little path and then you'd be able to ramp onto West D Street.
Does that answer your question, Teresa?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So I saw Brian, and then I'm seeing Kevin's hand after that.
Yeah, I like the new paved transition. I've actually taken that route a couple times for social distancing sake. And it's a little bumpy right now, but it does work. My concern would be that there is a grade getting up to that proposed speed cushion heading eastbound. So if, you know, people who are maybe not as confident on the bike are taking that route, they climb a big hill and they have to go over this speed cushion, and I wonder about traffic stacking up behind them and maybe being a little annoyed and doing things they shouldn't be to get around them. My other concern with this transition is that westbound bike traffic is often on that wide sidewalk that we discussed on the south side of West D. And it seems like the rational choice for those folks would be to still take that hairpin turn onto the path where you're trying to divert the pedestrian traffic instead of transitioning across the street and then taking the new proposed transition. So I just wonder if there's any other measures that you're thinking of taking to dissuade people from riding on the sidewalk against traffic.
We did look at an incredible amount of options to see what we could do. We're obviously restricted as far as the width of the roadway. There will be people, I mean, obviously the most ideal situation would be to have a path that goes all the way, but unfortunately, we're not able to do that right now. We would not get council support for that at this point. So that's off the table. But what we are trying to do though is, you know, for folks that don't feel comfortable on the roadway, you know, such as little kids or whoever it might be, we still want to do treatments that will help the situation, such as what we were earlier talking about, moving that path to the west so that you can have sight distance there and people wouldn't be potentially crashing into each other. So we are trying to take care of both situations as much as we can. So any other opinions, suggestions, we're all for hearing.
So is it completely off the table? Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I just want to say anything that's on this proposal will definitely help. So happy to see it.
Holly?
Thank you, Brian. I saw Kevin's hand and then Holly.
I just have a real quick question. If there will be any speed reducing devices or any devices that will help protect that bicycle lane that will become the turn lane that's between the two traffic lanes. Will there be a concrete divider or cones or visual things to help define for drivers that there will be an upcoming bicycle lane amid traffic?
So the thought is that, you know, we would have the sharrows so that the rider would be in the middle of the lane. And then, so let's talk westbound first. So we have that speed cushion to slow folks down at the top of the hill. And then, you know, the cyclist would then come down, get into that center turn lane, and then watch for traffic going eastbound and then get onto that path. And then there is basically a speed hump to the west of this location if you're headed eastbound. Is there a particular concern at a specific location that you're thinking prior to that?
Yes. So the new concept would have people progress farther west than normal and then turn left across traffic. So I'm concerned about oncoming traffic impeding on that shared space between the two car spaces. Is there any device that would be used to make sure that cyclists feel confident in having that space between two lanes of traffic?
I'm trying to pull up the visual here. There is a landscaped median just to the west of there. So just give me a second. I'll try to get the screen share to cooperate. Start sharing something new. Here we go. So you'll see right over here to the west, there's a raised crossing down at the neighborhood entrance. Then there's this planted and elevated with curbs median. And then where we're looking at the bike connection, there's this center lane that's just striped. But for the eastbound traffic, to hit someone in that lane, they'd have to jog left after a curb, which is not the most intuitive movement for them to make. Does that help at all?
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Christy.
So Christy, my question is taking on street parking away that's not an option?
So that was something that we really, sorry, I was trying to get you back your picture, so I'm actually talking to you. Okay. So we did talk about that. That is definitely a political issue. We took a look at the parking utilization out there. It is used a lot. If it's something that we feel extremely strong about, then we would need to go through a process with council to see if they would actually support it. If they wouldn't, then of course it's dead. If they would, then we could potentially move forward with talking to the folks out there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments, feedback? This is the time to give your input. I see Teresa.
I was just thinking it would be cool to do like a pavement art project on the intersection of Kelly and D when you do the raise, have some sort of fun design on the ground.
I like that idea too.
Do you have any, one of the thoughts, we do it a lot, but it's not art. I mean, I guess it's in the eye of the beholder, if it's art or not, but, coloring it, stamping it, that type of thing. Are you thinking much more like an art piece kind of thing on the ground? Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's something that we can look into. We do have to be very careful with, the federal requirements that we have for crosswalks, all of that. We're doing some art in some crosswalks downtown. And we're pushing the envelope on that one. With the federal requirements of what you can and can't do in an actual crosswalk, but it does not mean that that's out of the question. So we'll definitely look into that. Do you have anything specific that you're thinking about?
Not for design. I could send you a picture of what I'm thinking of.
Sure.
I'll just add, as we've been planning for open streets, although it's not happening this August 1st, of course, that concept of a tabled crossing at the park entrance would also be a beneficial piece for an open streets event along this corridor. If we wanted to move a stage out into the street or use that intersection in different ways for different community events, it provides a lot of opportunities. So that was part of what informed doing a tabled crossing versus just like a raised crossing on one side of the intersection. It kind of provides that entryway into the park a little bit more. I see Kevin's hand.
I'm curious if the city studied the traffic volume and whether any of these raised crosswalks had the type of volume that would constitute or justify doing a signaled crosswalk.
Yeah, none of these locations have enough volume for an actual signal. You know, we've been putting in the rectangular rapid flashing beacons at schools and locations that have a lot of crossings. We don't have that type of volume here. We do also have to decide, you know, with the funding that we have, what we feel is a priority for the different treatments. So these, you know, concrete's expensive. So of course, a tabletop intersection is going to be a little bit more expensive than, let's say, a raised crosswalk, or, you know, putting in, you know, a curb, of course. So that is something also that we want to weigh out here.
Well, thank you for your response. I think this will be overall a big improvement the way I see it. I'm just want to make sure we get it right.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christy. And just one more, what is the time frame on this? You said this is a future design. You'll be working on the design in the future after these other projects. What kind of time frame is that? Do you have any idea?
So this one, we are actually ready to go to not construction, sorry. We are ready to go to design right now. So Brock is ready. We have the survey work done. So basically, once we get the head nod from BPAC, we can start design.
Okay, great.
And we're hoping to get it done in time to go to construction next summer.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, and more of that fact, I'll just say I encourage anyone to come find my phone number or email address, and we can talk more about it after this meeting at some point soon. And then in the near future, we're looking at some community outreach, such as, well, getting a project webpage going, and then having like an interested parties list, and then sending out a mailing, informing folks in the area about the webpage and the interested party list. And then well, doing something like a community meeting, which at this point might be like a virtual community meeting, but yeah, anytime. I would just encourage anyone to feel free to reach out and talk about it if you have more questions or concerns after this meeting.
Great, thank you very much, Brock. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, we really want to. We really want to make sure that we get all of your concerns or any other thoughts you guys have on the designs. So if something comes to mind after this meeting, please let us know. Dennis?
Yes, Dennis, please go ahead.
I have a question on the raised crosswalks. Obviously, my concern is for wheelchairs. What's the width on the top there? Is it going to be such that it's not going to be rounded where at the very top? And the other section, the other question that I have to always ask is, being it's like a speed bump. You know, my vehicle, my ramp, or my handicap vehicle is lowered, and I've drug across a lot of things like this.
So
go ahead, Christy.
No, go ahead. You can go ahead.
I was just going to say, unless I'm mistaken, like the raised crosswalks, I mean, they're ADA compliant, and with the speed cushions, as they're called, the slope on those, I'm not really totally sure on the design. Maybe you or even Michael would know something about that, but it's a pretty gradual, pretty shallow slope. This isn't like a speed bump where you're like really getting thrown around. I think it's more gradual.
So the raised crossings would be flat on top, of course, with a little bit of slope so the water runs off of it. It's not a hump, it's not a speed hump that's rounded, it's just flat. So we would definitely make sure that any electronic device would be able to, any motorized vehicle that has the need to cross that would be able to, the width would be definitely big enough. As far as how we treat it going into it, we definitely make sure that nothing would be able to bottom out. So we have different options of how we can treat that. We can treat it so that the raised crossing is at the same elevation as the curb, or we can make them a little bit lower and then we would ramp the sidewalk down a little bit. So we have done raised crossings at different locations, and the elevation and the slopes going in and out of it can be very severe if you really, really need to slow down the speeds of the cars, or you can lower it a little bit. So those are things that we'll be looking at. We have put some in and we have different designs out there. So we can share different locations if people are interested in taking a look at them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Virginia Daisy Phase 1A that's going to construction right now has some similar treatments. So once that's constructed, that might be a good example to look to and give staff some feedback on. I really appreciate your input. I think Kevin had one last question, maybe before we move on to the work plan item.
My question was answered in the context of the last discussion. I was just concerned about ADA compliance in the ramps.
Fabulous, thank you. And thanks to our engineering staff for coming out in full force tonight, joining us for multiple different agenda items and sharing what they've been hard at work producing results with.
Definitely. Thank you very much, both of you. All right. Moving on to the work plan that we worked on last meeting. Emma, do you have, is that a thing? Like, can you make
Yes, it is. I'm working on it.
Okay, I don't have any idea how this.
Here we go. Yes, I've got multiple different windows open. Ta-da!
Yeah, you're amazing. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Holding this together.
Okay, so yeah, COVID happened since we last saw each other as a committee. The subcommittees had met prior to that, so great work as subcommittees coming up with draft content. I then took the compiled draft work plan that was originally going to come to the full committee at your April meeting that was canceled, and worked with Grace Kaplowitz to do some revisions and some suggested recommended edits. I can walk through some of those changes briefly. Let me just make sure that I can get to the right thing here with my windows. Okay, so this is all standard work plan stuff. I did add a little section at the top here about BPAC extending an invitation to the broader community members. So like applicants who were interested in serving on BPAC or interested in contributing to walking and biking in Springfield, but were not appointed to the committee this last cycle. I reached out to a lot of them initially after the appointments for the last recruitment round, and they were interested in being involved. So I just added this paragraph to explain that we'll be reaching out to them, and I'd love committee input on how and when you want me to do that. But that's my intention, and it's just a little bit more complicated now that we aren't having the in-person meetings at the moment. Then for the programming subcommittee, there were some revisions as to different dates. So we're looking at open streets in 2021 instead of this year. The Gears Blackberry Bramble ride that was an option for outreach clearly isn't going to be happening August 2nd. So there's some revisions there for the outreach piece. Then the Springfield open streets postponing to 21 and adjusting the timeline accordingly. With planning item, this, I just wanted to note that this was a West D Street item, but the continue to identify path maintenance needs for the existing path system in Springfield and communicate these needs to William Lane to maintain safe biking and walking environment. I think that that had stemmed from a previous BPAC work item to smooth out the path along the west east or the North Bank path further west from West B Street, kind of down by the boat ramp. So it seems like that item fits better here. So I just moved it over to this location in the work plan. And then the other changes, we had some discussion about whether the expand bike share further into Springfield should happen as a core item or whether it should go under this bike rack section, items for later, or when time allows, or when time is ripe, we could say. And since COVID has happened and Peace Health Rides is going through a variety of different changes right now, which I can share more updates about later, it seems like a better fit to put it under the bike rack section of the work plan. So that's just shifted to there. So those are the proposed changes. There were some other revisions that I worked with individuals who were the leads on different items to just push timelines out a little bit. I think there's a lot of great work in here that can be done remotely. It's just going to take a little bit more coordination to set up some frameworks so that all of you can get started on these work plan items in a more virtual way, or setting up a framework so that people can go out into neighborhoods and do inventories. But instead of doing a big group thing, it would be more individually. So let me just switch over. That's the intro, and then Grace did a bit of work figuring out some items that might be most appropriate and helpful to get started on. So if you want me to walk through a few of those thoughts, I'd be happy to share that, but I'll turn it over to Holly for now while I look up that information.
Great, thank you, Emma. Does everyone feel like they know they have their action item that they're working on? Allie, did you get, did we ever work you into having an action item on the plan?
I know Emma talked to me about the bike share piece, and I was okay
Right.
with assigning me to that. I'm not sure what else evolved from there, though.
Right. Yeah, I just heard her saying we're maybe tabling that.
It's still going to have some discussions. I just don't have good certainty as to the timelines given the current context. So I think it's still helpful to have Allie as a lead on that item, but just know that,
Okay,
you know, she might be lending a bit more support and time to other items in the meantime until it's ready to move forward. Or maybe it starts bubbling up and then there's a lot to do with it. We'll see. I can't foresee the future.
For sure. Yes, Teresa.
And I'm sure there's lots of reasons why bike share was taken off the table, but I wonder if there's opportunities to look into other ways of getting people access to bicycles who don't already have their own bicycles, like different types of more extended loan programs, if that's accomplishing part of the goal that bike share was. It's not as on demand, but no.
Dennis, did you have anything to say on the work plan? Sorry, I thought I saw a hand.
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
So this will need an official approval by the full committee is the action that we're looking for tonight. If you'd like, I can run through a few items that might be good for the COVID context, more staying at home, or I can just also communicate that with the individuals in those who are the leads on those items. Okay. We're running a little bit behind schedule, and I have a lot of updates to share under updates.
And yeah, let's just go ahead, and if we can get a motion to approve this work plan, and then yeah, let's talk about the other things individually. Anybody with a motion?
I'll second approving the work plan.
All right, so Carla motion to approve it. We have a second from Kevin, and the work plan is approved.
Let's have a vote, please. Can you call for a vote?
Oh,
you have a motion.
Yes,
Sorry.
Thank you for, that was good. Okay, we had the motion.
And
then we
let's
missed
do
that
a
part.
vote by, if people are opposed, then speak up. Otherwise it moves forward so that we don't have to have everyone unmuting and making the echo
Okay, that
chambers
sounds
echo.
Okay, so I will give a minute. If there's anyone opposed, please speak now. Please unmute yourself. Okay, you think that was long enough? All right, should we call it approved? Okay, we're doing it. This is so bizarre.
Sounds good.
It's so funny talking to people on a computer. All right, then I think we're ready to move on to info share. And I don't know if we want to start. I think Sam, this might be our last time with Sam.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's been wonderful having you. Thank you for being our connection to Eugene.
Yeah.
I don't know if Emma has anything else to add.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for your time as the Eugene Active Transportation Committee liaison. You've really embraced it fully, going above and beyond just attending the meetings. I remember being out, I think at 7 a.m. or maybe earlier at Guiley Elementary School with you early in the morning, doing the crossing guard inventory. You really jumped in and served the Springfield community above and beyond just serving as a communication support between the Eugene Committee and the BPAC. So thank you so much and best wishes with what you go on to next.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And I also wanted to just acknowledge that Steve is on here tonight and he'll be taking over the Eugene ATC liaison role. So thank you so much for having attended tonight's meeting and kind of being able to see how we operate, given that some of it's normal and some of it's a new context. So typically we go through rounds for some of the liaison positions. I know that Simon Dodds is on here from Willamine and he has to make sure to cut out right on time tonight. So I'd like to turn it over to him to share any updates relevant to BPAC next.
Can I nominate Sam for having the best hair? Sorry.
Hey, this is Simon. Actually, if I had a camera on my computer, you'd see my hair is even longer than Sam's right now. I'm going 6 months without a haircut, so. But yeah, just quickly for Willamine, just the trails up at Thurston Hills are open for bikes and pedestrians right now, obviously with the social distancing and so on, but I think the bike trails are in good enough condition to do some mountain biking and stuff. So probably want to keep 6 feet away from another biker in that regard anyway. So and then just the other thing is not necessarily me providing info to BPAC, but I'd be interested if there's any feedback, if anybody's been on the Millrace path, the Middle Fork path, if you've had any issues with horses, seen any horses, equestrians out there and so on. That pilot project's been running for just over 2 weeks.
I've been out there a number of times. We love watching the horses. The horse people say they think it's the greatest thing ever. They all are super stoked about the path. And my daughter thinks watching the horses on the path is really cool. So far, it's been very positive from my end.
I was out there on the first morning on my bike, and I was kind of nervous to pass like a line of 5 horses.
I stopped and waited for them. So.
Yeah, well, I was going in the same direction, so it's kind of like, well, you know. Plus, the other thing was one of the horses hadn't thrown its rider, but somehow the rider had come off the horse, and the horse had left and gone home on its own down the path. That was on the first morning. That's the only issue I've heard about at this point. So they were trying to track that horse down, but we haven't heard of any other issues. It doesn't sound like that many equestrians are out there using it right now. I think the ones maybe that have been using it have been coming in from the Pacific Equestrian Center, which is kind of private property on the north side of the Millrace, just kind of above the Georgia Pacific property where the pond is and so on. So I don't know how many people may or may not have been trailering in and parking at Clearwater Park or not. But yeah, if anybody's been out there, apart from Holly, and has got any feedback, whether it's now or in the future, then it'd be great to hear throughout the summer. We'd like to try and get some idea of how many equestrians are actually out there this summer. I'm trying to think of good ways of doing that, because a trail counter or something like that isn't quite appropriate, I don't think. But we don't want to have the expense of going to a permanent access for equestrians. I think if the pilot project is a success, we don't necessarily want to have do it permanent if only 1 or 2 horses a week or something like that have been down there. So so we're going to try and think of a way of tracking how many people are using it. But that's the info I have to share. If you have anything to share back on that or anything else, then let me know.
Yeah, Simon, this is Brian. I did go out on the mill race on my way to Thurston, actually, which was great. Trails are in good shape. I noticed there was I guess you could call it an equestrian warning at the Booth Kelly trailhead, but I didn't see any other signage. Is that the only one in existence?
There's one there. I think there's one at the Jasper Road trailhead on the Millrace path, and then there's at least one, obviously, at Clearwater Park. Yeah, I was hoping, we were going to get as many signs and information up there as we could. I pushed for as many as we could. There was some reliance or hope that people would be checking websites and Facebook and stuff like that before going out. My argument was that I never do that. I just go. So I pushed for as many signs as we could. I'm not sure if there should be any others and they've been thrown into bushes or something like that. But is there a particular place you were thinking they could be?
I was just wondering. I was actually thinking that someone might have thrown them in the bushes or something like that, because I only saw the one, and I thought there might be more out there. Lane signage, I've noticed the leash reminder signs, while I really like them, don't seem to be very popular. I usually end up putting them back up. So.
Yeah.
Kevin, did you have anything to add?
I think Willamette Lane is inviting a whole world of liability into their redefining of multi-use paths. I can only imagine situations where, say, somebody in a wheelchair is pushed off a trail by a horse that's out of control. I think we're going down a place that accommodates one group without particularly considering how inviting a 2,000-pound animal might affect things like children, infants, strollers, wheelchairs. I think it's a very high liability, dangerous position. So I really hope it goes well. But as a motorcyclist, mountain biker, road biker, I feel like whatever user group is the smaller participant always has conflict that's originated by the more powerful group. And a horse is a very powerful thing to have on a multi-use pedestrian path.
Yeah. I mean, just speaking personally, not necessarily as a Willamette Lane employee. Yeah, like I said, I was nervous passing 5 horses in a row, going in the same direction. I probably would have been a bit less nervous going in the opposite direction because I could get past them quicker. But I would encourage you. I mean, obviously, I can relay that verbally to my supervisor.
So every other area that I interact with that has horse pedestrian interactions, there's a yielding concept where one user group is required to yield to the other. Will Willamette Lane require pedestrians to yield to horses if they're on the path, or require cyclists to yield to horses for the safety of the horse user? Are those the type of things that you've considered for the user conflict scenarios that will inevitably come about?
Yeah, that's what's on the signage out there right now. It's just kind of that standard kind of yield, that kind of standard yield signage that, cyclists and pedestrians yield to the horses. There is a particular conflict point, on the Middle Fork path with where the bridge goes over the mill race. So there's nowhere else for the horses to go. A lot of the rest of the Middle Fork path, they can mostly walk on, grassy areas to the side, but obviously going over the bridge, then they have to go over the bridge. So I think we've already had a suggestion, even from the equestrian group, that some signage just before the bridge on both ends. Another, probably one
So
of those.
what would the expectation be to yield to a horse that's unattended?
Yeah, well, that would be very advisable. Yeah, in that scenario, I got off the path as quickly as I could when the horse was coming towards me. I was on my bike.
So if a person in a wheelchair were in that scenario, would they be required to leave the path to yield to a horse?
Well, if it was in a scenario that I encountered on that first day, then yeah, obviously your own personal safety comes first. Obviously, if you got a 2,000 pound.
How would a wheelchair yield the path to a horse?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I know where you're going with it, and I might agree with you too. This is, a decision.
I feel like although I haven't had a personal liability issue, I feel like we're going to have one if we progress. I'm sorry, did not want it to be open to horses, but they're a big animal that will have to be integrated. Sorry.
Well, I would encourage you definitely to submit all your concerns in writing. I haven't got a link with me right now, but I know through the Willamette website there's a comment page where you can write away every concern you have, and I'd be happy to see everybody write anything, whether it's good or bad, on all of this stuff, because we need the feedback. I'd hate to I'd hate for people using the pathway and kind of thinking this kind of stuff, but we just don't hear about it. So I would like to get as many comments as we can, and the website right now is a way to do it. I'll try and kind of write down, if you don't want to do that or whatever, I can certainly submit those comments in a different way. So.
I'd be happy to submit my concerns.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Great, thank you, Simon. We have a few more updates from different people. I know that I have quite the list from the city just because it's been a while and there's been a lot going on. I might be able to do some of those by email, but sometimes it's helpful to be able to ask a quick question in person. So I'll kind of look out to those of you who are on video camera. Would you prefer email, or I'll ask two questions, email or a brief verbal update now that goes a little bit past the 7:30 mark? So people who prefer the email, raise your hand. Prefer, okay, we got two of those. Then prefer verbal update now. Okay, so I'm seeing a little bit more for verbal. I think I'll give verbal. We will send out the meeting minutes will be available as well. So if you need to hop off right at 7:30, please feel free to do so. And then I can also do a follow-up in email for some items. So I emailed all of you about the regional transportation grant funding cycle. I just wanted to let you know that that went to the Metropolitan Policy Committee. They did a public hearing on it. They're accepting public comment for the next, I think, about a week or so. It's open right now. Currently for Springfield related projects, that includes full funding for the Q Street Reconstruct project from Pioneer Parkway East to 5th Street, and about $500,000 of grant funding for walking and biking network improvements. So that's similar to what I was talking about earlier when we had the previous walking and biking safety improvement grant. It's kind of a package of funding that we can fund different walking and biking needs throughout the city. So that's looking hopeful. It's also funding applications that weren't City of Springfield specific, but some safety analysis for Springfield as part of the safety grant application. There's a bicycle enhancements grant that has both funding for bike fix-it station location. So that relates to the work plan item that you just approved and Teresa's leading on, as well as funding to install about 150 bike racks throughout the city of Springfield at locations where it could really help improve biking. For instance, if you want to go to the grocery store and maybe not have your bike knocked by shopping carts and have a secure place to lock your bicycle, it might help encourage biking throughout the city. at locations like that. Maybe we partner with William Lane on some locations in parks. I know I was down on the North Bank Path and saw bikes near the waterway, and there's no place to lock up your bike if you want to enjoy the river area in some places. So I'll be following up with BPAC and wanting more input. City Council is specifically wanting your committee to weigh in on, what should we be looking at for improving bike parking across the city. It's still going to be a ways out before the funding is actually available, but you can start thinking about those items. It continues to fund the Safe Routes to School assistance, and there's another number of projects throughout the whole metropolitan area. So I'll send out a link with more information about that. I've been working with Lawton to start the process to apply for state Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant funding. That would be to complete the Jasper at Dundia by Douglas Gardens Elementary School crossing on Jasper Road, and then also the Jasper at Filbert Lane rapid flashing beacon crossing for Mount Vernon Elementary School. So we're trying to leverage 2 different pots of funding and get more projects built for students walking to and from school in Springfield. A couple updates related to COVID. I just wanted to let you know that going to City Council next Monday from our economic development staff is a proposal to expand permits given the emergency declaration situation we're in right now. So a lot of businesses are trying to reopen and provide restaurant seating, but with some of the physical distancing requirements, they have to have more space between tables. So they're looking for more outdoor dining space, and we're taking an item to City Council on Monday that would allow during the emergency declaration more use of potentially private parking lots or right-of-way, street space, et cetera, where businesses could make a proposal and say, hey, can we expand our outdoor seating and have more space dedicated to dining outdoors. There is, as I alluded to earlier, Peace Health Rides, the bike share system, is going through some evolutions. Originally, it was going to be shut down beginning of June. Peace Health Rides, the current operations are continuing through the end of this month. The backstory of that is that we have local sponsorship from Peace Health for operations, and City of Eugene owns the bicycles, but through various evolutions from going from social bicycles, starting the system, being bought out by Jump, being bought out by Uber, and then Uber deciding that they didn't want to run the local system here. It's going through a transition to figure out what the operation and structure in the future of bike share will be. So for the next couple months or so, my understanding is that City of Eugene staff from the end of June through maybe the summer-ish will be running Peace Health Rides bike share, and then in that time period, they'll be looking to another operator, maybe some local nonprofits, to take over the operation of the bike share system. Briefly, point-to-point staff who run our transportation options program for the region at LTD were laid off a bit over a month ago. I'll take your question at the end, Kevin, here. I see you. So through the regional transportation meetings, we're trying to figure out, okay, what does our regional transportation options program look like? That came about due to revenue forecasts not looking good for Lane Transit District, and they do provide some of the overhead costs, even though a lot of those positions and programs are grant funded. So that's an evolving situation that I could provide more of an update on as I know more. And then LTD transit service in general is just a much lower service level, and that's expected to continue over the coming year. I wonder if Kevin needs to leave. I'm seeing his video. Kevin, do you have a quick question? If you have to start out. Oh wait, no, there you are. I'm not hearing you. Please unmute.
Sorry, my computer was, I thought you guys couldn't see me, so I was doing weird stuff. That's all that happened.
Oh, it's all good. Did you have a question?
I did earlier. I just wanted to add context to the other members. The bike share, it sounded like you were talking about City of Eugene taking that on. That's a very costly thing for the city to take on. Those bike shares are, without community funding, are not a profitable break-even type of venture. So it's a big investment for the city to put into that if they're going to take that on.
Yeah, so they own the bicycles.
Wasn't sure if other members had that context.
Yeah, they do own the bicycles already, and Peace Health, my understanding is that Peace Health is continuing to sponsor the vast majority of the operations. I think that the city is covering a bit more funding to kind of tide over in the meantime, but they're looking to a longer term solution so that they're not operating it for the long term. I think that's all I have at this point that's really urgent. Thank you, Christy. I see that you have to head out. Lawton, are you still here? Did you have any short updates to share?
You mentioned the big update, of course, which is that point-to-point has been dissolved for now, and that was 3 really important staff for our regional team, so that's a bummer, but we've been just kind of redistributing responsibilities. And yeah, a lot of the stuff we're working on right now is kind of more on the back end, strategic planning, working on our next 5-year strategic plan and other initiatives like that. But one fun thing that's happening this week is that a local businessman donated $5,000 to purchase some kind of low-end bikes and scooters and skateboards for students at Riverbend School. So we're doing a giveaway day on Thursday and should be providing about 60 kids with a little active transportation equipment and a helmet, and so that should be really cute and fun. And that's it.
Thanks for the positive note.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. And yeah, thank you everyone for being here. We're ready to wrap up.
We didn't ask about any Eugene updates. I don't know if there's anything urgent from Eugene ATC.
Yeah, Sam or Steven?
I would say nothing urgent right now. Would you
If there's anything that you want to email to me, I can send it out with the follow-up email. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you all. I appreciate your flexibility and adapting. Oh, there's Michael. Thanks for joining us on the visual. Have a great evening, everyone, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.